Hello, I am Dr. Lillian Agbeyegbe, your friendly community health educator, Executive Director of The Rest of Our Life. Commissioner Nkechi Uzogu, thank you for inviting me to join this important town hall conversation as we observe Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Today, I'm going to share on three main things that I think are important when we talk about domestic violence prevention. And so some of my other colleagues are going to share with you about data and statistics, but my presentation is going to focus on domestic violence prevention, red flags, power and control. And so I'll just go ahead and share my screen, and I will have that going for you. Give me a minute while I navigate the system. So today I'm going to be talking about red flags and the power and control wheel, as well as prevention as recommended by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. As you know, we're talking about intimate partner violence. And like I said, my focus today is on red flags, the power and control wheel, and domestic violence prevention. What do I mean when I say red flags, and why red flags important for us? I teach a class in domestic violence crisis counseling as an adjunct faculty at the Bowie State University. And in one of those classes, when we talked about prevention, one of my students was like, wait, when you say domestic violence is preventable, are you saying that the victims could have done something to stop themselves from being in that situation? And that's not what domestic violence prevention means. Domestic violence prevention means that we as a society have a role that we can play to make domestic violence less likely to occur. One of those ways that we can be contributing to preventing domestic violence is educating members of our community. And so this is what the red flags are about. Red flags are some things that you should be worried about when you are in a relationship, or somebody that you know is in a relationship and you see these things. It's an opportunity for you to call them and let them know that this is a red flag and this is something that they should be concerned about. Here are the red flags. So quick involvement. You meet somebody today and then tomorrow they're telling you they want to introduce you to your family, they want you to get married. There is such a thing as love at first sight. That is very true. But because we live in a generation where we are more systemic and pay attention to things, the quick involvement might be somebody who doesn't want you to get to know their temperament and their behaviors and those abusive tendencies. And so they really want to get you across the line before you really find out who they are. So we should be wary about quick involvement. Somebody wants to get a relationship and the next minute they're ready to introduce you to your family, or they're ready to move in with you or do all of those things. So quick involvement is a red flag. Another red flag is unrealistic expectations. Somebody who you just met and they expect that, but we are talking, why can't I have the keys to your house? Why don't you want to introduce me to your family? Why can't I pick you up from work every day? But you're like, I don't really know you though. We just met. And for somebody who doesn't think that far, then that's a red flag. So unrealistic expectation to expect you to give them your account number, go away with them for a month of like, I'm moving out of town and I want you to move with me. And you don't really know much about them. So when somebody has unrealistic expectations in a relationship, that's a red flag. That's something to be concerned about. Their use of force of sex, and they do that playfully. So it can be like, yeah, it's a joke, but they're throwing you down, they're making you have sex against your will, and they're cracking jokes about it, and they seem like it's not anything serious. Use of force for sex is actually uh, something that's called rape. And so if somebody rapes you in a playful manner, that is not a good thing, whether you're in a relationship or not. So somebody shouldn't be using force and trying to play down. And we'll look at that when we look at minimization on the power and control wheel. That's not a good thing. That's something that somebody should be worried about. Hypersensitivity is another thing. You can't crack a joke around them. You can't be yourself. It's like they don't let go of things. You say something, and is it because of this? Is it because of that? And you're like, seriously? That wasn't even a thing. But they're so hypersensitive that you find that you're walking on eggshells when you're around them. That's a bad thing. So somebody who's hypersensitive, it's really a red flag that they might have a controlling tendency. They blame others. They are not willing to take accountability for their own actions. So when you get to know them, and if you find out, for instance, they don't really have a close circle, and they're like, at work, everybody's at fault, everybody does something wrong, and their family on their father's side, everybody's done wrong. The family on the mother's side, everybody's done wrong. The school where they went to, everybody was. It's like, did you do anything wrong in any of the situation? And they can't tell you anything that they did wrong. It's everybody else did something wrong. That's a red flag. That's something for you to pay attention to. Verbal abuse. Somebody who is very carefree with the use of bad language, emotionally abusive language. Oh, look at you, you don't even know how to dress. Look at how you look at your size. Why are you being silly? And I'm using the light word, but just for you to get an idea of really verbal abuse. You are this, you are that, you this, you that. Verbal abuse is a red flag, and you should slam on the brakes if you're getting in a relationship with somebody who's using that sort of language on you. Extreme jealousy. Now, this is one that can be very confusing because people um, like to be fussed over, and so you think that, this person really loves me, and this is why this red flag is extreme jealousy, because some jealousy can be maybe healthy, but if it's extreme, if it's one thing to say, hey, why is that person checking you out? Did you see that person checking you out? But then if somebody's checking you out, that's not your fault, right? So if somebody begins to say, why is that person checking you out? Did you lead them on? Did you give them, were you looking at them? Did you smile at them? Did you wink at them? That's extreme jealousy. And that's really not healthy. That's a red flag. If they have a controlling behavior, they want to know where you are from when you wake up to when you go to bed. Probably want to know what you're dreaming about as well, and they're like, oh, I called you at this time, you didn't pick up your phone. Hey, my phone isn't part of my hand, so I can actually can drop my phone and I can be without my phone. So if you're going to get bent out of shape because you called me and I didn't pick up my phone, there's something wrong with that. Your phone is not supposed to be on you 24/7. So if somebody's saying, oh, I called, I'm going to pick you up, I'm going to take you here, I'm going to take you there. Controlling behavior is a red flag. Isolation is another red flag. You had a life before you met this person, and now you're in a relationship with this person, or they're starting to get into a relationship with you, and they no longer want you to spend time with anybody, no matter what the connection is. They're trying to disconnect you from your family. They're trying to disconnect you from your friends. They're trying to disconnect you from colleagues at work. There's a happy hour after work. And happy hour doesn't mean you have to drink. I went for a couple of happy hours and I had my Sprite and ginger ale, but it was a time for bonding with your colleagues. So you can't go for a happy hour. You can't go and see your siblings. You can They just want to keep you to themselves all the time. That's a bad thing. That's a red flag. They have this Dr. Jekyll and Hyde personality, and what that means is that they blow both hot and cold. They blow both hot and cold. That's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So they're nice 1 minute and they're like a stranger the next minute. They're nice 1 minute and a stranger the next minute. That is a red flag. Somebody who can carry on being nice so effortlessly, but at the same time throw a tantrum that is totally unexpected, unnecessary, unpredictable, and then just flip over and be careful. That's a red flag. The use of violence and threats of violence, banging the wall, they're throwing things at you, they're telling you, putting the gun out, threatening you, and saying they're going to do things. All of those are red flags. The cruelty to animals or to children, either your children, their children, some other person's child, your pet, their pet, some other person's pet, and somebody who isn't careful to be nice to defenseless people like animals and children, that's a red flag that, they might think nothing about being abusive to you as a person. And of course, if they have a past history of battering, if you know either through them or through somebody else that they've been in a relationship before where some battering took place, you need to be careful. All of this information I got from the New Hope Incorporated website, the signs of an abusive relationship, and you can find this information online as well. So these are red flags that people should be wary about in terms of who you're in a relationship with and staying in a relationship with somebody who displays this behavior. Another thing of concern in the domestic violence awareness is the power and control will. Domestic violence is really about power and control. Sometimes people like to say, oh, it's because I went and brought this person from, say, Nigeria, and I brought this person to the US, and they're now in the US, and they now think that they're all that, and that's the problem. No, because there are people who are US citizens who are domestic violence victims. So it's not about you when to bring somebody from somewhere. And there's some people who say, oh, it's because she's a nurse and she has all this money and she thinks she's too big for her shoes. So I'm trying to put her in her place, and that's why the violence happens. No, the people who are domestic violence victims who are not nurses, the people who are domestic violence people who are secretaries, who are hostesses, who are lawyers, who are policewomen, believe it, policemen, So domestic violence is really not about race or cultural location, although those are intersecting factors. The underlying reason of domestic violence is power and control. And I usually find it important to talk about this because sometimes people don't recognize that they're in an abusive relationship because they're waiting to see violence in their relationship. So, but if you look at the power and control wheel, and I will start from 12 o'clock and go, rounded, it says using intimidation. So when somebody is making their partner afraid by the way they look at them, they're making gestures, they're smashing things, they're destroying property, they're using intimidation, let me use my acronym. I have this, these are 8 attributes. I actually have an attribute in which I used to tell the story. It doesn't happen in the sequence, but I find it helpful to use it to tell the story of the narrative of how you can see domestic violence around you. So the first one I use, and I call it I have pin bracket because if you look at the domestic power and control wheel, what it says is using male privilege. However, we know that males are not only abusers in abusive relationship, females can be abusive as well. So I've changed that to partner privilege. And what does partner privilege say? It says treating the other person like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like master of the castle, being the one to define who does what. And I think that no matter how much somebody loves a person, you have to have your own personality. If you're in a relationship and you cannot make any decision at all, something is wrong. That means the other person has a partner privilege where they feel entitled to make, and this is what we talk about, the power and control. They feel entitled, they're in control, and they should make all of the decisions in that situation. That is something that is going wrong. So don't wait and say until this person beats you up before you know that you're in an abusive relationship. If you're in an abusive relationship, if you're in a relationship where you're being treated as a servant and you do not have an opportunity to contribute in the decision-making process in that relationship, and you're likely in an abusive relationship. I is the use of intimidation, like I was saying. So this person feels entitled, they're trying to do things, and you don't want to comply. Then they begin to intimidate you by the way they look and the things they say, and begin to smash things and do all of those things. And that is letting you know that you're in an abusive relationship. C for me, I say using coercion and threats. So they've tried outright intimidation, and intimidation is not working. They just drop the pretense and come out, use coercion and threats. And here it tells us that they make or carry out their threats to do something to hurt themselves, so they're like, I'm not going to eat, and they don't eat for days, and you're panicking. They threaten that they're going to commit suicide and you're hurt. They're going to report you to the authorities if you have children, and they begin to really threaten you, or they've made you do something illegal and they're saying they're going to call law enforcement on you. Begin to use threats and coercion and threats. Again, you don't have to be physically abused to know that you're in an abusive relationship. You're in a relationship where somebody's always threatening you about calling immigration on you, about reporting you to law enforcement, about committing suicide. You are in an abusive relationship. People who do that also use emotional abuse. So aside from using coercion and threats, they begin to put their partner down, make the person feel bad about themselves. Oh my goodness, you're ugly. You don't dress well. I can't even go out in public with you because of the way you dress, because of the way you talk. I can't even believe that you're this sloppy. You're this. They just really make a person feel bad and make the person feel less than who they are. They're using emotional abuse. So again, recognize that there's no physical violence involved in this, but they're belittling the person such that the person's confidence in themselves is being eroded. You are in an abusive relationship. People who do this also do minimizing, denying, and blaming. You see that in the wheel. And what is minimizing, denying, and blaming? It says making light of the abuse and not taking concerns that the victim is raising seriously. So you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you hit me. Oh my goodness, did I really hit you? That was just a show. That was just a light show. You're over dramatic. You're just making things up, and you say, oh, you called me. No, I didn't call you, no, nothing. They minimize what you're happening. And then that begins to work on your mind because you're like, I could have sworn you did this to me. But because they are denying it and denying it so confidently, looking in you in the face and denying it, you begin to doubt yourself. Or if they accept that it did happen, they blame you for it and say, well, if you had come home when you should have come home, I wouldn't have been so angry to slam the door in your face. I wouldn't have been so mad to have thrown the food at you if you had made the food to taste nice or something. So they minimize what you're experiencing. They deny it when you confront them about it, or they blame you for it. Then when they do that, they also use isolation. Because once you're going through all of those things where they're denying, you might find they need to sort of like test and validate it and like, wait a minute, am I overreacting? I came home and I cooked the meal, and my partner threw the meal in my face, and I told my partner that really hurt my feelings, and they told me I was overreacting. You want to validate that from somebody else, but you can't do that because they kept you in isolation. You can't talk to your friends, you don't know anybody, and maybe made you resign from work, so there's nobody to talk to. You're really in isolation. Be careful. You're in a relationship and somebody says, oh, they have a job, they move out of town, or they move out from what they're leaving, as and they keep you in a new environment where you don't know people. Be careful. Those are signs that you might be in an abusive relationship. People also use the children in abusive relationship. Either they hurt the children so that the other partner can be hurt, or they threaten to report so that they're like, I'm going to call the authorities on you, and they're going to take the child away from you. And this person wants to comply with whatever they're doing because they don't want to lose their children. And then lastly, in the power and control, they use economic abuse. So economic abuse can happen in two ways. Either they're outrightly spending your money or stopping you from getting money. So they can prevent you from getting a job. so that you're economically dependent on them and you have to ask them for money for everything. And that way you don't even want to challenge them. Or they actually take your own money that you make and determine how your money is spent. So I said all of this about the power and control will to say that you might not always see physical violence, but you have to know that these behaviors, especially when they happen consistently and continuously, as an indication of power and control in one person in a relationship, and this is an indication that you're in an abusive relationship. So what can we do in terms of prevention? Well, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, which is the United States' foremost public health institution, has 6 recommendations about what we can do to prevent intimate partner violence in our communities. And the first one, it says teach safe and healthy relationship skills. So social emotional learning is a program that teaches people how to handle their emotion. And sometimes we know that abuse stems from people not being able to control their disappointment and things like that. So if we are able to teach and have a curriculum that teaches it from K to 12, sadly, um, that's not uniformly taught right now. You do have some schools that have social emotional learning programs, but it varies from school to school. It varies from county to county. We all trying to advocate for government to standardize this so that everybody who goes to school learns social emotional learning, helps them regulate and how they react to disappointment or things like that. They're also advocating for teaching healthy relationship programs for couples. When I was talking earlier, for instance, I was talking about, I've heard some people say, oh, I went and I brought this person from Nigeria and she came into the US and then now she thinks she's all that. Actually, it may be that you do not know how to engage in a relationship in a healthy manner. Because guess what? The people who weren't brought from anywhere here who are in abusive relationships. So it's not about that. It's, do you know how to respect your partner in a relationship? Do you know how to negotiate? Do you know how to have conversations? Do you know how to resolve conflicts? Do you know how to address yourself when you're hurt? All of those things. So if we teach relationship programs for couples so that they can know how, two people coming in from 2 different backgrounds, you're not all going to resonate the same thing. So let's teach healthy relationship programs for couples. Another pillar of the prevention technical package is to engage influential adults and peers. Particularly, it talks about engaging men and boys as allies in prevention. Now, one of the things that I've noticed in domestic violence awareness, and you can see from the flyer for this event, if you looked at it, all of the speakers are females. And sometimes when we are all females and having all of this conversation, the men think is a feminist agenda thing, but it is not. One, because men sometimes are victims as well. But the reason why it's important for us to engage men as allies is, one, um, we want to dispel the notion that this is a feminist movement thing. 2, men are more likely to listen to men and boys like themselves, right? So if I'm saying something, a guy can tune off, but a man might know exactly how to say it so that it's appealing or it resonates with a fellow male person. So we're told to engage men and boys as allies in the prevention message, bystander empowerment and education. I was reading some lady who said she went into a restaurant with her young daughter, 14 years old or something, and there were a group of men sitting at a table, and one of the men made a sexist comment to her obviously 14-year-old child, and none of the other people at the table said anything to him. Now, so it was only one person who had a bad behavior, but the thing is, no other person at the table said anything to him. And this is what we say about bystander empowerment and education. It's not enough that you wouldn't be abusive yourself. Are you letting your friend know that, there's no reason for them to abuse their partners? So how do we educate people to also speak up when they see abuse around them? And it talks about family-based programs. So we're educating everybody in the family, we're educating the parents, we're educating the children, because guess what? Sometimes abuse can be picked from the environment. Victims can learn how to be docile, and abusers can learn when they see that the abuser's behavior is rewarded by compliance from the victim. They can think that that's what they want to do. So we want to have family-based programs as well. We're educating people in the family, both the parents and the children, to know how to interact with each other. A third pillar in this is to disrupt the developmental pathway towards partner violence. So we talk about early childhood home visitation, and this is what I talked about, children growing up in abusive homes, for instance. If we're visiting those homes early and have the opportunity to get in touch with those children and make sure that even if the school doesn't have a social emotional learning curriculum, we're encouraging them or registering them in after school program that touches on social emotional learning so that they know not to imbibe the abusive characters that they are seeing as they're growing up. It talks about preschool enrichment with family engagement, again, engaging all the schools, parenting skills and family relationship programs. And sometimes parents get overwhelmed with raising their children and it trickles down on how they are acting. So let's teach people parenting skills and treatment for at-risk children, youth, and family. So a child who's already in an abusive relationship is more likely is at risk to become an abuser themselves. So how do we funnel them into programs that can help address the issues that they're facing? Another pillar here is to create protective environment. So improve the school climate and safety so that people are in school, they have the opportunity, maybe that's the only place that they're going to learn. They have the opportunity to learn something different from what they're learning at home. Improve organizational policies and workplace climate. People can go and practice safe behavior there. Modify the physical and social environment of neighborhoods so that there's not a concentration of people who practice poor behaviors, because then everybody's going to think that that's acceptable. This person is beating their spouse, that person is beating the person they're dating, they're in a relationship. Everybody thinks that this is what needs to do. We need to modify the physical and social environment so that people are doing things differently. Another pillar is to strengthen economic support for families and strengthen household financial security, because the research has actually shown that in some cases, when women are the higher income earner in the household, that sort of brings some sort of insecurity in the family that can push the men to become abusive. So how do we support households to make sure that, men can earn the income that they need to feel manly and be on top, or whoever is earning, there's a balanced distribution of income in the house. Strengthen work family support as well, so that they're not too stressed out. This is not an excuse. There are lots of families that are stressed, so we're not saying that, you can excuse your abusive behavior and say it's due to stress. But we know that when we support families, they're better able to interact with themselves in a healthier way. And the last pillar is to support survivors to increase safety and lessen harms. So we want to have victim-centered services, listen to the voices of victims. Later on at the end of this month, I'm going to be speaking at a webinar um, put together by the Maryland Family Violence Council, because earlier in the year, the Family Violence Council actually spoke to some survivors to get their perspectives on what we can do differently in the state of Maryland. So that information is going to help us look at the programs that we're doing. And this is what the DCDC says. We need to do victim-centered services, not so much of just what one person thinks, but let's have the voice of survivors, people with lived experience informing the work that we're doing. Look at housing programs. Sometimes people remain in abusive relationships because they have nowhere to go. And so if we have housing programs where they can stay, and they're more likely to leave. Work with first responders and civil legal protections. We know that a restraining order, a protective order, is not a foolproof protection against injury or death in an abusive relationship. but it is a helpful tool. It can be a helpful tool. So how are first responders showing up? How's the civil protective system, civil legal protections going on? Patient-centered approaches when people go into the hospital with conditions that are really related to their abuse. How are healthcare providers trained to work with them? Treatment and support for survivors of intimate partner violence, including teen dating violence. So if we put all of these things in place, we are likely to be preventing or supporting people who have experienced violence in our community. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. This is my email. If you want to stay connected, you can find me. I am on LinkedIn, and email me and we can continue the conversation. Again, Commissioner Nkechi, thank you very much for having me, and I hope the rest of the town hall goes great. Thank you and bye.